Okay, so we continue our module wireless LAN concepts. Continuing from channel management, we've introduced what wireless LAN is, what are the components that we have. We've talked of access points, we've talked of controllers, the protocols that are used. Now we get into what we call channel management. Right, so to give a brief background of what channel management is, we're going to start by defining what the channel is. I think it's very important. We start by defining what the channel is. When wireless devices are transmitting or receiving wirelessly, obviously, they use specific frequencies to do that. So we have a range of frequencies that are being used by all devices communicating, like I say. All devices communicating, they have a specific frequency range that they use. That range is divided into smaller ranges. Let's say we have this frequency range, 2.4 to 2.45 gigahertz. Our frequency is in gigahertz. That's our frequency range, from 2.4 just to 2.45. That range is divided into other smaller ranges. Those are our ranges, and we call those smaller ranges the channels. Now, every device communicating wirelessly uses one or more of these channels. So let's say this is our channels. When we talk of channel saturation, we have a situation where multiple devices are using one channel. When a lot of devices are using one channel, the channel becomes saturated. It's sort of the same thing as congestion. When a lot of traffic is going through one lane, then that lane gets congested. So channel saturation is sort of the same thing as congestion, where you have a large number of devices using the same channel to transmit and to receive traffic. So we start here by introducing ways that we can reduce this channel saturation. How can we reduce channel saturation? So we have three ways that we have there: direct sequence spectrum, frequency hopping, and OFDM. So the first one basically what we have is, or may I put this? Okay, let me put a new slide here, because I think I'll need to draw a couple of things. New slide here. Let's have a new slide here. Right, the first one, direct sequence spread spectrum, is a modulation technique designed to spread a signal over a large frequency band used by ETO 2.11b devices to avoid interference. Right, so with DSSS, basically what we have is, if this is our original channel, this is the frequency, this is the power. If this is our OG channel, you can see it's very narrow. The band is very narrow. That's the channel being used by devices. If we have a large number of devices using that same channel, it will definitely get saturated. That's our OG channel. With DSSS, that channel is spread like this. This is the spreading of the channel. So this channel is spread like this. Now, instead of having a narrow range, this narrow range being used, we now have a larger frequency range being used. The larger the frequency range being used, the less likely it will become congested. But this comes at a compromise, a little power, I didn't say, decrease. So the power of the signal decreases, but you do mitigate channel saturation. So that is DSSS for you. I think this was the beginning of how to reduce channel saturation. The other method that we have frequency hopping. So with frequency hopping, if this is our OG channel, which is being used by a device, frequency hopping says we can have multiple frequency ranges being used. Now a device is hopping. Instead of using this OG when communicating, it can use this one, it can hop and use this one, it can hop and use this one, it can hop and use this one. So you never know at any given point which channel it is using, because it is changing channels every time it's sending a message. Now there is need for synchronization between the transmitter and the receiver. So when the transmitter is on channel number 1, the receiver knows channel number 1 is transmitting, so I need to receive with channel number 1. When the transmitter hops, goes to channel number 3, for example, therefore the receiver knows channel number 3 is now sending. So that's another way of reducing saturation, because instead of using one channel, you have multiple channels being used with frequency hopping. Second way of mitigating channel saturation. All right, the last one, OFDM. This is the newest technology that is being used. OFDM. What does it do? Okay, let me start by defining FDM, frequency division modulation, before I go to FDM. So FDM says every channel, this is a channel, it gets used by one user. So this is channel number 1 being used by a user. Then we have a frequency guard in between here. Then we have another frequency being used, channel 2. Then we have another one, this is 3. Then lastly, we have 4. So with frequency division multiplexing, we have one frequency range being used by a specific device at a specific time, right? With OFDM, instead of having them, let me say not orthogonal, with OFDM, it's sort of the same thing, but now they are orthogonal. It means that at 90 degrees to each other, they can easily interfere with each other. They can overlap, but without interfering. With FDM, there is no overlap. There is you can see in between here, there is a frequency guard which separates these two channels. Channel 1 and 2, they're being separated by a guard, so that those frequencies, they don't interfere, right? With OFDM, we have an overlap. So we can have 1, 2, 3, 4 channels. Here we have, let's just say 1, 2, 3, 4 channels. The same channels that we have here. 4 channels, they are overlapping. The reason why they are allowed to overlap is because they are orthogonal. They won't interfere with each other. And the major difference between this one and this one is in terms of the bandwidth that is being saved. So instead of only having 4 channels, you can see if our frequency here is 2.45, let's say 2.45 gigahertz. If our frequency here is 2.45 gigahertz, how many channels can we accommodate with OFDM? We can only accommodate 4 channels here. But with FDM, with OFDM, however, we can accommodate more. We can have 5, 6, 7, 8 channels. We can have more channels because we are using OFDM. So with FDM, we don't have overlapping, therefore we avoid interference. With OFDM, the channels overlap, but the orthogonality of those channels avoids interference. So this is OFDM, the keyword here being orthogonal. Orthogonal, which, although the channels overlap, we do avoid interference. Right? So these are the ways that were used. These are just modulation techniques which are used to avoid or reduce channel saturation. Right, channel selection. The 2.4 gigahertz is subdivided into multiple channels. We've gone through that. Every device uses a specific frequency range. Frequency ranges, they are subdivided into channels. In those channels, we have the 2.4 gigahertz band being subdivided into 22 megahertz channels. So if we are saying we are communicating at 2.4 gigahertz band, it means we are using these channels that we have right here. These are the channels that we have. Channel 1, 2, I think they are 14, 13, 12, 13, 14. 14 channels between 2.4. This number confused me yesterday. I don't know where it popped up from. This should be 2.4, not 2.2. This number right here. I think I'm not correcting slides on C-score here, but I think that number should be 2.4. So the 2.4 gigahertz band these are frequencies between 2.4 gigahertz and 2.45 gigahertz. That's the 2.4 gigahertz frequency band. The band is subdivided into channels. The channels are 22 megahertz each. In the channels, here we have a channel. This is channel number 1. In color, I think that's orange. So this is channel 1 in orange. We have channel 2. This becomes the channel 2, this one, starting here. This is channel number 2, ending right here. Another 22 megabytes. And you can see all those channels are overlapping. The reason why they overlap and still not interfere because of orthogonality. So with the 2.4 gigahertz band, we have 14 channels, each channel 22 megahertz. Then we have a separation of 5 megahertz between channels which follow each other. Channel 1 and 2, in between we have 5 megahertz. If you have devices communicating, your APs should have non-overlapping. Let me put it this way, right? Your APs should have non-overlapping channels. So if we have an AP1, AP2, and AP3, this is its area, BSA, this is its BSA, and this is its BSA. When we talk of overlapping, it means if I use frequencies in channel 1, if I use channel 1 here, I use channel 1 here, I use channel 1 here, there will be interferences in these areas. Communication will be affected in those areas because channel 1 from access point 1, access point 2, access point 3, they interfere. So if you are using overlapping, if you are using multiple access points, you need to use what we call non-overlapping channels. And the non-overlapping channels that we have here, it's 1, this orange one, 6, and 11. These are called non-overlapping channels. We can also have, I think if you choose 2, let me see, 2, 7, probably with 12, I hope. There could also be non-overlapping channels. But the problem is channel 12, 13, 14, they are not used. They are not in use. So we only have one set of non-overlapping channels, 1, 6, and 11. So in this example that we're just given, it means this one I can use channel 1, this one I can use channel 6, this one I can use channel 11. Then in between these areas, there will be no interferences because we're using different frequency ranges for our channels. And basically that's it for the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. Right, let's go to the 5 gigahertz. Instead of having 14 channels like the 2.4, this one it has 24 channels, and each channel is separated by 20 megahertz. So here in illustration, we have channel 36, channel 40, 44, 48, 52. Not sure how they come up with these numbers, 36, 48, but this is just channel 36. The ones we were doing before, they have channel 1, 2, 3, up to 11. This one is 36, 40, 44, 48, etc., until you have 24 channels. Separation between channels, 20 megahertz, as I said, and non-overlapping channels, we can have 36, 48, and 60. So if you are using, in the same example that we gave, if you have overlapping areas with your access points, then you use this one, we have channel 36, this one we have channel 48, this one we have channel 60, so that there will be no interferences in these areas. Another important thing with the 5 gigahertz standard, speeds. You see, I think in the previous sections, we touched briefly on speed. 5 gigahertz offers more data rates, more speed. It offers more speed. How does it offer more speed? We have the same, almost lower bandwidth here, 20 megahertz with the 5 gigahertz band. With the 2.4, you can see the channel is to 22 megahertz, which is larger than 20 megahertz here. But how does it have more speed? Because there is a relationship between the bandwidth being used and the speed of the traffic. That is the data rate. So how does 5 gigahertz band offer more speed? You see, with the 5 gigahertz band, we have what we call bonding. Instead of using one channel, which has 20 megabytes, you can bond 2 channels and have 40 megahertz. So if this is a channel with 20, another 20, these are channels. Let me put it this way. So these are 20 megahertz channels, channel 36, channel 40, channel 44, channel 48, channel 52, 20 megahertz. With the bonding, instead of having this, we can have the channels of 40 megahertz, and we join these two, and we join these two. So that is bonding. We can as well bond these two and have 80 megahertz channels, and we've bonded these 4 channels, 20 megahertz channels. So this is where the speeds changes, because we have what we call bonding with 5 gigahertz. We don't have that with 2.4. When the channel in 2.4 is 22 megahertz, it stays 22 megahertz. That's the maximum bandwidth you can have. But with this one, you can bond, you can have up to 80 megahertz. This means you have ×4 increase in speed. So 5 gigahertz, more speed because of bonding. Briefly now, comparison between the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz bands. The 2.4, you see, in terms of penetration, range, let's start with range. Instead of range, they offer more range than the 5 gigahertz. So 2.4, in terms of range, let's say 2.4, 5 gigahertz. Very important to know the difference between these two and where to apply. So in terms of range, this one is okay. It offers more range. Why? Because of the frequencies they have larger wavelengths. With the larger wavelengths, it means we have more penetration. They can go through walls, through your doors, through your furniture. Range, it offers for more range. This one, less range because of the high frequencies, low wavelengths. All right, in terms of speed, 5 gigahertz obviously offers more speed because of the bonding that we mentioned. So if you want to, in terms of application, if you want applications that needs more speed, you use the 5 gigahertz band instead of the 2.4 gigahertz. If you need more range, you use the 2.4 instead of the 5 gigahertz. Now, in terms of interference and congestion, interference or congestion. In terms of interference or congestion, the 5 gigahertz is the best to use because it is less congested. A lot of devices that we have in our homes, they use the 2.4 gigahertz. It means a lot of interference. With a lot of interference, we have a lot of congestion, right? As well, in terms of interference and congestion, number of channels. With 2.4, we have only 11 channels that are being used. With 5 gigahertz, we have 24 channels that are being used. It means in terms of congestion, this one is more congestion 2.4 because of the number of channels, the less number of channels that are being used. Okay, all right. Now, in terms of applications, I've already explained applications. If you're prioritizing range, for example, you are using your IoT devices, you need to prioritize range. You don't need a lot of speeds when you are using IoT devices. For your smart homes, for your smart home devices, those cameras, security cameras, CCTV cameras at your home, you don't need a lot of speeds for that. So it's easier, you use the 2.4 gigahertz. If you are streaming, video streaming, you definitely need the speed. You don't need the range. You are streaming, why do you need the range? You don't need the range, you need the speed. Therefore, you have to use the 5 gigahertz band. Planning a wireless LAN deployment. Now, as an engineer, this should be one of your tasks as a network engineer, administrator, designing, planning. Number of users supported by a wireless LAN depends on the following: the geographical layout, number of bodies, number of clients, the data rates, the use of non-overlapping channels. When planning the location of the APs, the approximate circular coverage is very important. Now, as I said, as an engineer, it's very important to have a well-planned wireless LAN deployment because it ensures, if it is well-planned, it definitely ensures performance. It ensures things to do with security as well as coverage. These are very important when you are planning your wireless LAN: performance, security, and coverage. If there is a lot of interference, lack of planning when deploying your wireless network, a lot of interference, you basically have problems with coverage, you have problems with congestion. So it's very important to have a well-planned wireless LAN network. How is this done? We have what we call a site survey. Guys in the industry probably have experience with this. A site survey is done. You find the best placement of your access points. I'm sure there are applications now which actually can help you with access point placement. Kuti ndikaisa access point apa, rinoita coverage yakaita sei? Will I be able to cover the whole area and ndinofanira cover? So where do I place all those access points? You can see from this diagram, these access points, where are they? Probably these are the access points. This one, central, this is an access point, this is an access point, this is an access point, this is an access point. If those access points are not placed well, you have problems like these ones. Coverage, you probably have one area not covered, there is no Wi-Fi. Some rooms in the offices, some offices, they don't have Wi-Fi coverage, wireless LAN planning and deployment. So basically, after a site survey, you see with coverage, you see will there be no leaks. I don't want to say leaks, but yes, will there be no leaks? Yeah, Wi-Fi. Yeah, you see, I've seen this cool women's university. I've seen this in a lot of places, but specifically women university example. You see vanhu vakamira muwall, line revanhu vakamira pawall nemafoni vari kuita Wi-Fi. That's a problem. Planning, probably they allowed with Wi-Fi kuseri kwejuraho. But with proper planning, Wi-Fi, if this is the juraho, this is Women University of South Africa, this is outside. Wi-Fi inofanira kugumira exactly ipapa. Munhu akauya panapa nefoni yake apa should not get access to the Wi-Fi with proper planning. So those are some of the things that are needed, that an engineer needs to consider when deploying a wireless LAN. Right, wireless LAN threats. You see kuti wireless network yedu It's open to everyone, very open. It's very difficult to, for example, keyboard network. A keyboard network, tinenge tine maports atinoshandisa. Let's say, for example, switch redu. Switch redu rinenge rine in an office. Probably that office is secured. Probably maports wire, they are secured as well. Not everyone can get access to those ports, therefore getting access to the internet or to the network. The keyboard network is secure that way. With Wi-Fi, if this is the Jura or a women's university, munhu atori panze apa atori access to the Wi-Fi, atori access to the network. It means if it is an intruder, are very malicious, then they can attack the network easily. So the wireless network is very open to everyone. It's very easy to attack. There is easy access than, for example, in the keyboard network. Ukangosvika pairi chete paine coverage, watone access to it. Ukapiwa keys, passwords, if you get authorized, watone access to it. Whereas there are actually wireless networks which are open. You can have wireless network here open, you can get access to it. Then if you're an intruder, that's a problem. So wireless networks, they are not very secure. A lot of security needs to be done as compared to the cable networks. Right? Attacks can be generated by outsiders, disgruntled employees, and even unintentionally by employees. Okay? Wireless networks are specifically susceptible to several threats, including interception of data, wireless intruders, DOS, rogue access points. So, vanhu vedu vepajirawo ndo vari apa ma-wireless intruders aya. These are wireless intruders. Budget rinogona kudhakwa because of those guys. Interception of data. So, since if we are communicating wirelessly, we are using a shared medium, we can have what we call a man in the middle. A man in the middle where a device or an access point, a rogue access point. A rogue access point can intercept data and use that data maliciously. And we have ways, I think it is explained, let me see, many in the middle, we'll get there. And we have ways that we can avoid interception of data. One, encryption. With encryption, you can intercept the data, but you won't be able to read what that data is. You can intercept, but you won't be able to read. We also have, 10 minutes. All right. We also have wireless intruders, which can be avoided by having authentication. Strong authentication. Munhu ari pajirawo kana asina password, if he's not authenticated to get access to the network, they shouldn't have access to that network. But they do have, it means either there is no authentication per network or someone inside akabudisa the pre-shared key, then everyone can get access to the internet. So we have wireless intruders, we have DOS attacks. Someone intercepts data, they deny services to other clients in the network. That can happen. If services are denied, then that's a problem to the organization. So that's a threat as well. DOS attacks, rogue APs. Rogue APs creates man in the middle attacks. Data interception is done. Then we have all the other problems that come with data interception. DOS, wireless DOS attacks. This can result from the following: improperly configured devices, malicious user intentionally interfering with the wireless network, accidental interference. Right, with improperly configured devices, it's not always a malicious user who can result in us in a network having, in an organization having a DOS attack. It could be someone engineer kuziva basa ipapo oconfigure network zvisiri izvo. If that network is not configured zvakanaka, then clients' devices won't get access to the network. That is a DOS attack. So mukati engineer asiri kuziva zvaari kuita, they can lead to a DOS attack. It's not always, an attack is not always from a malicious user. It can be as well from an employee, improperly configured devices. Then we don't have access, clients don't have access to the network. That's a DOS attack. A malicious user, that's another thing. We can have an intruder who has probably access to the network. They have the admin privileges. Then they change something in the network. I don't want ABC to get access to the internet. That's a DOS attack. Malicious user. Then we have accidental interference. To minimize the risk of a DOS attack due to improperly configured devices and malicious attacks, harden devices, device hardening. I think CCNA 1 chapters around 15, 16, you did the device hardening. Even in chapter 2, device hardening. All those passwords, dzamaisa pama switch, pama mchiseki wama privilege user exec, privilege mode, mchiseki my lines and all device hardening, muchisa my passwords. That is device hardening. So with device hardening, even in wireless communication, it makes my users not get access to the network. Therefore, they cannot make changes to the network. They cannot deny services to the network. So we have device hardening, keeping passwords secure, password, creating backups, and ensure that all configuration changes are incorporated of ours. If configuration changes, that's another problem in an employee. During the day, network fire, then you have my network changes. My network changes, they can disrupt the network. That's a denial of service as well. That's a DOS attack. It's not always a malicious user or external user who attacks the network. It could be inside the organization. Changes to the network, they can lead to a DOS attack. Rogue access points. A rogue AP is an AP or a wireless router that has been connected to a corporate network without authorization. Once connected, the AP can be used by an attacker to capture MAC addresses, capture data packets, gain access to the network, or launch a man-in-the-middle attack. I think I'm going to explain more about the rogue access points with the next slide, man-in-the-middle attack. A personal network hotspot could be used as a rogue AP. For example, a user with a secure network access enables their authorized window host to become a Wi-Fi AP. To prevent installation of rogue APs, organization must configure controllers with rogue access point policies. Right. A rogue access point, basically, I'll explain a rogue access point with this man-in-the-middle attack, where a hacker is positioned between two legitimate entities in order to read or modify data that passes between two parties. The popular wireless MITM attack is the twin AP, where the attacker introduces a rogue AP and configures it with the same SSID as a legitimate AP. Defeating the MITM begins with identifying the legitimate devices on the wireless LAN, and to do this, there is need for authentication. Right. Let's talk about the man in the middle. And I'll use example here, the twin AP attack here. So we have an access point, we have a user, we have an access point ready, no legitimate, this one. Right. When the user wants to communicate with the internet, it goes to the access point gets to the wired network, then there is communication with the internet. So there is communication between the user and the access point. How does the user or the client get access to the access point? It uses the SSID, it is broadcasted. This is in simple terms. It is broadcasted, authentication, pre-shared keys, then associated. Now we have access to the AP. What a rogue AP does. So this is the rogue AP. it broadcasts the same SSID, the same network name as this one. So if a user sees the same SSID that it knows, the name of the network that it knows, it might get authenticated and associated with this AP instead of this one. And once it gets authenticated with this AP rinotoita basa raro, rinotoendesa munhu kuinternet. This is the internet. Rinotoshanda basa raro zvakanakisisa. This is the internet. But the problem ndeyekuti now you have your data going through a rogue access point. The access point, the man in the middle gets access to data rako, gets access to mapackets ako, and that's a problem. Problem. So this is what a rogue AP is, and this is how it gets introduced to the network. Now, how do we secure our networks up? How do we secure our networks against these rogue APs? If you have a controller in your network, so for large organizations, if you have a controller, every access point is authenticated by the controller. So the controller knows every access point in the network. Therefore, pakauya rogue, ichida kupinda network, it won't be allowed to work because the controller does not know it, basically. So that's one way of reducing attacks caused by rogue access points, men in the middle. All right. Potential threats. Secure lines. Potential threats, 1 minute there. Potential threats that come with having men in the middle. We have what we call eavesdropping. You get access to the network. Eavesdropping, get access to the network. You get access to the traffic. You intercept. Then you use that information for something else. That is eavesdropping. We can have identity theft. Once you have that traffic, you can use the stolen information to impersonate the victims. Moita fraud. My banks, they are going through that. Money is being stolen through that. You can have DOS attacks as well because of the MITM. Right, let's continue with the next slide. Let's continue with the next. Okay, I can see less than 1 minute.